Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is PhoenixGinny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Storytime Saturday number 27. And today we're going to be reading Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, chapters 17 and 18. We are almost done. This is the beginning of the end. I'm so excited, because then we get to go into Goblet of Fire. And Goblet of Fire is so good. One of the best. They only get better and better. But first, hello, especially if you're new, welcome. Feel free to talk in the chat or to leave a comment on this video or this live stream, depending on when you're watching this. Join the conversation, because when I read, I don't just read it, I also make commentary on what I'm reading, and please join the discussion. I enjoy that. And please leave a like on the stream or the video. It really helps, tells YouTube that you like the video, and YouTube is more likely to share it with other people, so then I can get more viewers. And if you're not subscribed, click subscribe and become a subscriber. I have 39 subscribers. I just love getting new subscribers. It's so exciting. And click the bell notification icon next to that so you can be notified the next time I go live and the next time I upload. I will probably be going live next weekend as well, Friday and Saturday. But my schedule is always subject to change. And so if you want to be kept up to date on my streaming schedule, follow me on Twitter, which is linked in the description. I will probably be live streaming next Friday at 8 p.m. Oh, wait, no. I'm probably going to be streaming, as I'm going to have to change up my schedule because I'm going to be working a couple of mornings next week. So 6 is probably when I'll be streaming. I don't know, though. I don't know for sure yet. I will post my schedule next week, well, in advance, and follow me on Twitter if you want to see when I'll be streaming next week. But I'll be streaming probably Friday night, and I'll be playing more Halo, and on Saturday night, will we be finishing this? I don't think we'll finish this until the week after next. This week, next week, and the one after that. So the week after next, we finish this book. Yay. Okay. But I'll be reading more Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban next week, most likely. So if you want to be up to date on my stream schedule, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Also linked in the description is my Patreon, which I have just launched. I am a writer as well as a gamer and reader. I write as well, and I'm going to be writing something every month that I'm going to post on Patreon. I'm going to post I just posted a personal narrative, and it's absolutely free. I posted it last Monday for Memorial Day. And it's free because I want people to get a sample of my writing so they can see if they like, if they like it or not, and if they want to become a subscriber. So that personal narrative on there is free. It's only 8 pages long. It's not that long, but it's one of the best things I've ever written, so you should go check it out. But I'm going to be writing things like personal narratives, essays, short stories. It's mostly going to be short stories, I hope. And maybe some poetry on there. Probably not much, though. I write lots of things. Poetry is all the way at the bottom of the list. I'm not very good at it, but I might. So if you would like, become a patron on my Patreon, and you will get access to monthly content. It's only $5 a month if you want to spend that, and I will explain that more on Monday when I officially launch it. I already have something on there now, but my first paid piece, my first piece that I'm going to post that you have to pay in order to read, I'll be posting on Monday. But I'm going to be sharing a portion of it today. What I'm releasing on Monday is a Harry Potter film analysis. So basically, when I was in college, I took a class called Special Topics Harry Potter. Every major program has every special topics requirement, I believe. I know that the English department requires a special topics class. And so special topics can be anything that's offered. It's something very specific in your field of study. I'm studying literature. I was an English major, and so I picked a special topics English course, and the one that I picked, I actually took two of them, but only one of them was required. I took special topics Harry Potter. My second one was special topics The Inklings, which is a special group of writers from the 1950s, which was C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien and Chesterton and a couple of others. But that's not why we're here. Interesting side topic. I do a summer reading program every year. I have a summer reading. It's not a list. I pick a book series to read every summer, and usually I pick a book series that I've never read. Usually it's Harry Potter, or Artemis Fowl, Alex Rider. Last year it was Chronicles of Narnia. This year I'm doing something different. I am reading for the very first time The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I'm actually starting with The Hobbit because The Hobbit came first. So I'm in the middle of The Hobbit, and it's so good. But I'm really excited because I've never read those books. I know. It's sacrilegious, I know. And I took a class on it, too. I was supposed to read it for my course. I was supposed to read it for that class, but I didn't do it. But I'm reading it now, okay? So, side note, yes, I'm doing that. But I also took special topics Harry Potter, and we had to do a final research paper, or we're supposed to present an essay at the end of the course to kind of culminate what we've learned, and I chose to write about the films. And so I wrote a film analysis paper. It was only like 16 pages long, and it was actually not very good. I've read it, recently, because when I first wrote it, I wrote a note to my professor at the end saying, hey, I'm not done with this. I'm going to turn it in now because this is when I said I'd turn it in, but it's not done. There was so much more I wanted to talk about and I just couldn't. So I'm going to finish it and then post it online somewhere later. This was years ago. This was almost 10 years ago. I graduated 2015. It was 7 years ago. But I wrote the essay, it had to have been sophomore year, junior year. I think it was junior year. So it was like 2013, 2014. So it was a good while ago. And I said, hey, I'm going to finish this and I'm going to post it somewhere. And she's like, hey, send me the link. And I got to get in touch with her because I got to send it to her when I post it on Monday. But I'm finally fixing it like I said I would do all those years ago. And it's so much better now. It is 60 pages long. The first 30 pages, the last 30 pages are Deathly Hallows, just Deathly Hallows. I wrote a film analysis. Basically, I wrote, which I'm going to read the beginning, the introduction, to explain it properly to you. But I am... I am reading... what I did was I present the argument that the movies accurately reflect the books, even when it strays from the books, because it accurately depicts the spirit of the books. And I have so many examples of how the movies reflect the books in a cinematic way rather than a literary way. And the last 30 pages are just on Deathly Hallows alone. The first 30 pages I kind of breeze through books 1 through 6. And the last 30 pages, the 15 of it is dedicated to part 1 and 15 of those pages are dedicated to part 2. I had a lot to say, apparently. Ooh, it's a doozy, but I'm really excited. So on Monday, you'll be able to have access to the full work if you become one of my patrons. But I'm going to read the introduction and I'm going to read the Prisoner of Azkaban section to you because that's what we're reading now. So I'm going to do that now. Wakey, wakey. Oh, jeez. It's on my laptop. Okay. So, here it goes. Okay, so the title of the paper the essay. I hate calling it a paper. One of my professors in college was like, don't call it a paper. It's not a paper. Like, it's a paper. It's not a piece of paper. It's a piece of work. Call it an essay. It's not a paper. It's an essay. So there's always a part of me that's like, don't call it paper. Don't call it paper. All right. It's called Harry Potter and the Art of Adaptation, an analysis of the Harry Potter films. In my experience as a film enthusiast and a Harry Potter fan, I have run into some conflict with my fellow Hogwartians. It was almost difficult to go to the movie theater with them. I hated it, they would inevitably say after the Harry Potter film ended. It was nothing like the book. A lot of Harry Potter fans believe that they are true fans because they don't like the movies. They would argue, if you really loved the books, you would understand why the movies are horrible. This was an assumed and grossly inaccurate generalization of me and other fans like me. I loved the books, but I loved the movies as well. I recognized that they weren't like the books exactly, but I still felt that the movies betrayed the books authentically. What was I seeing that these fans weren't? After many years of closely analyzing, and simply enjoying, these films, I came to realize what was happening. There was a miscommunication. All 8 Harry Potter movies portray the books accurately. The difference is they represent them cinematically. Just as literature uses different techniques to communicate ideas, film does as well. Film directors and editors use camera angle, music, and set design the same way authors use imagery, metaphor, and juxtaposition. Over the years of watching the Harry Potter movies, I realized that these movies were communicating J.K. Rowling's ideas through film devices rather than literary ones. If a Harry Potter fan claims not to like the Harry Potter films solely because they do not match the books, they are making an insubstantial claim. I've concluded that one simply cannot judge film in the same manner as one judges literature. Just like one cannot justify scientific fact on fiction, you cannot justify camera angles on paragraphs. Claiming not to like the Harry Potter movies because they're not like the Harry Potter books is the same thing as claiming not to like apples because they don't taste like oranges. If a person expects to taste an orange when he bites into an apple, he is either blind or a fool. Do not go into a film expecting to get the book. They are completely different media. In this essay, I will show how the films depict the books authentically. Additionally, I will also talk about particularly controversial decisions the filmmakers made regarding book accuracy. I will show how even when the movies stray from the books, they still capture the spirit of the story. And that is the intro. And then I talk about Sorcerer's Stone, which you'll have to read, which you'll have to become a patron to read this section. And I have a separate essay for every single movie/book. So, if you don't want to miss out, become a patron. Let me just skip through Chamber of Secrets. I'm in Chamber of Secrets now. Here we go. Prisoner of Azkaban. Puberty at its purest. Out of all the Harry Potter movies, Prisoner of Azkaban, in my experience, was perhaps one of the least favorite based on the case that it didn't match the book. Many people complained that it left out too much. This book was one of the most introspective, meaning the filmmakers had to work especially hard at conveying introspective development visually, causing them to deviate from the book. Page 74 from Film Wizardry talks about how Alfonso Cuarón, the director, solved the problem of filming a large and complex book. By focusing primarily on Harry's development as little else mattered, they made room to show character development in other characters as well, Hermione in particular. They show Harry's growth into adulthood not just through his mood swings, but by the parental figures that surround him. One of the primary introspective themes that Harry specifically experiences in the book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, is one that is carried out through the rest of the series, the complications of puberty. Harry is a teenager now and is beginning to show it. His manner of speaking to his hateful relatives has completely changed. He is no longer the timid child that keeps out of their way. When Uncle Vernon instructs Harry to keep a civil tongue in his head when talking to Aunt Marge, Harry replies bitterly, "If she does when she's talking to me." Page 19. Harry corners his uncle before his uncle leaves to pick up his Aunt Marge to convince him to sign his Hogsmeade permission form. Uncle Vernon mistakenly thinks Harry's trying to go with him. "I'm not taking you," he snarls. Harry replies, "Like I wanted to come," with a nasty attitude. Page 20. That's not all. Harry even goes so far as to blackmail Uncle Vernon, agreeing only to not let slip to Aunt Marge where he really goes to school if he will sign. Certainly not a scared little kid anymore. He even uses magic unintentionally on Aunt Marge by causing her to swell up because of his abrupt and intense swing of emotion. Page 29. His family members aren't the only ones to face his moodiness. Harry talks back to Professor Snape in Chapter 14, something teenagers are infamous for. Snape says things about Harry's father that Harry doesn't like, so Harry tells him to shut up on page 284, something he wouldn't have dared to do in the 2 years previous. Anger isn't the only emotion frequently found in teenagers. Harry's first inklings of romantic attraction occur when he sees his first girlfriend for the first time, noticing, as nervous as he was, that Cho Chang was extremely pretty. Page 259. Harry isn't the only one going through some things. Hermione is having a particularly difficult year as well. Not only is she trying to handle her teenage emotions, but she has a larger than usual workload, probably more than even an adult can handle. Using the time turner, Hermione is able to take more classes than normally possible, giving herself more homework than she has time for. On page 264, Harry asks her if she even attended that day's Quidditch match. She affirms that she did, but she can't talk about it because she needs to finish her homework. Harry tries to get her to eat. "I can't, Harry. I've still got 422 pages to read," she says, sounding slightly hysterical. Ron makes her feel worse because he holds her responsible for the disappearance of his rat. She bursts into tears on page 265. Her distress comes to a head when she encounters Draco disrespecting Hagrid on page 293 and slaps him across the face. Later that same day, she makes her disdain for divination known to the divination teacher, Professor Trelawney, and storms out of the classroom shouting, "Fine! I give up. I'm leaving." Page 298. The movie may not have kept all these specific details, but this theme was clearly there. Daniel Radcliffe, Harry, acted the hormonal teenager perfectly by responding to Aunt Marge in a defiant, ungrateful way, and by slamming his bedroom door and kicking the leg of his desk in fury after his magical mishap with her. Also during this scene, the special effects team had dishes clatter and lights flicker all by themselves to show Harry's intense emotion magically, which didn't occur in the book. Other examples of teenagerness are featured at Hogwarts in added scenes and elements. There is a transitional scene shortly after the students' arrival in which Harry and his dorm mates are acting particularly rowdy, giving it a boys will be boys sort of feel. During breaks in outdoor classes, the actors were allowed to wear their uniforms loosely as real teenage students would. This is also the film to introduce Muggle clothing at Hogwarts, hiring Janie Tamime to make a more mature look for the actors. Sibley 774. That's film wizardry. While many fans didn't like this touch, it showed each character's sense and desire of style, something that a teenager develops at this stage. Boys weren't the only ones who showed a bit of angst in the movie. Emma Watson portrayed female teenage angst fantastically, taking Hermione's dislike for divination a step further than the book by knocking over the crystal ball before storming out of the classroom. She also punches Draco Malfoy in the face when it was only a slap in the book, 293. It's not all anger with her this year, however. Suddenly she is concerned with her looks like a teenager would be, commenting during the rescue of Buckbeak's scene, "Is that really what my hair looks like from the back?" There's also an unusual number of parental figures for Harry in this book, including Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, Prime Minister Fudge, Professor McGonagall, Professor Remus Lupin, and Sirius Black. This scene plays a part in Harry's pubescent development, revealing that while Harry is growing up, he needs significant parental direction. In pages 65 to 68, Harry overhears an argument between Mr. and Mrs. Weasley over whether they should tell Harry about Sirius Black. They are clearly concerned for his well-being, with Mr. Weasley wanting Harry to be treated like an adult, and Mrs. Weasley wanting to protect Harry's feelings. Mr. Fudge lets Harry off lightly concerning his aunt because he feels sorry for Harry, page 45. Professor McGonagall looks at Harry with pity, 150, when she refuses to sign his Hogsmeade permission form to protect him. Later in that same chapter, Professor Lupin spends time with Harry, encouraging him about his fear of Dementors. That suggests that what you fear most of all is fear. Very wise, Harry. Page 155. Sirius Black has his turn at a little parenting as well. When it is revealed that Sirius is not the villain, he unmasks Ron's rat as Peter Pettigrew. Pettigrew then proceeds to plead with his captors to let him live. He appeals to Harry that Harry looks just like his father, and Sirius seeks to protect Harry by shouting at Pettigrew, "How dare you speak to Harry? How dare you face him? How dare you talk about James in front of him?" Page 374. That's the chapter we're reading today. Despite being an orphan, Harry is surrounded by adults who care for him. The movie includes all these characters and shows them in a parental light, especially with Lupin during Dementor lessons and Sirius Black desiring to have Harry live with him. When Harry first sees Mrs. Weasley in the movie, she fusses over him, making sure all his things are packed for school. When Harry affirms that he is ready for the trip to Hogwarts, she says to him affectionately, "Good boy," patting him on the cheek. Mr. Weasley warns Harry about looking for Sirius Black in the very next moment. During Harry's meeting with Mr. Fudge, he attempts to protect Harry from the truth about Black by proclaiming, "You're safe." He also warns Harry that he shouldn't wander in Diagon Alley alone. Professor McGonagall refuses to sign Harry's permission form in the film, just like she does in the novel, but she also touches Harry on the shoulder, saying, "I'm sorry, Potter, but that's my final word," with a sorry look on her face. The filmmakers took particular care in making Lupin and Sirius Harry's best fatherly figures. The actors commented on the parental roles of Lupin and Sirius on pages 79 and 86 of Film Wizardry. Gary Oldman, Sirius, felt that he was able to play the special role because he loves Dan. "I just use what's already there," he explained, and David Thewlis, Lupin, described his character as a great comfort to Harry, an insight that aided him in his remarkable performance. Many details were considered in the making of this film, but the details that prevailed were the ones that reflected the introspective themes of adolescence apparent in Harry Potter and his close friends, teachers, and guardians. And if you would like to hear more, become a patron. I talk about all kinds of things. I talk about why I agree with Dumbledore getting angry in Goblet of Fire. I explain where he's like, "Harry, we'll put your name into the Goblet of Fire." I have a whole argument for that. So check it out. The best one is Order of the Phoenix. Oh, because that film is so good. David Yates is the best director of the films. He is hands down the best. Just the way he films is so good, and I explain that. I explain his film techniques a little bit. So if you love film and you love the Harry Potter books and the Harry Potter movies, you'll love this. So please check it out. 60 pages, more than worth $5 in my opinion. I've worked really hard on this. And I will release a Monday. I'll release a Monday on video. I will release a video on Monday explaining Patreon a little bit and explaining what you can do and how it will help me and what you will get for becoming a patron and whatnot. But my Patreon is linked in the description, so check it out. We can get started. A little bit of a longer start there, but it's so good. I'm so excited. It's so good. But we are going to read now. That is why we're here. We're reading chapters 17 and 18 today. Let's do a recap of the previous chapters. We read chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 15 was the Quidditch final. Yes, it's been a couple weeks since I did this. I apologize. I didn't stream last week because I was sick and my voice was gone and my throat was hurting. But we read the Quidditch final. That was chapter 15. And that was where we read how Buckbeak is going to be executed, and Hermione gave Draco a little smack across the face. And Gryffindor beat It was Slytherin that they were playing. Yes? Was it Slytherin that they played? Yes, it was Slytherin. They played against Slytherin in the Quidditch final, and they beat them. And then Chapter 16 was Professor Trelawney's prediction. That's where they started doing their exams for the year. Yes, it's basically all exams. And then they get to Professor Trelawney's exam. And Harry tries to fake it by saying, I see a hippogriff in the crystal ball. And she's like, oh, really? Has it been executed? Is it dead? And he's like, no. And she's like, well, maybe you're not actually seeing it right. Because Harry's upset. He was like, no, the hippogriff survives. Because he wants the hippogriff to survive because it's unjust that he's being executed. And I mentioned how that is kind of it's a premonition because Buckbeak is going to be rescued. They lost the appeal. They're going down to see Hagrid because Buckbeak is being executed and they want to comfort him. And then they're running away from the cabin, from Hagrid's hut, because they're going to be in trouble if they're caught outside on the castle grounds after hours. And Scabbers was struggling in Ron's hands, and Scabbers has just escaped. I believe. No. He hasn't escaped yet. He hasn't. He's going to. He's struggling. And they just witnessed, or think they witnessed, Buckbeak being executed. So that is where we are now. Chapter 17. Cat, Rat, and Dog. Harry's mind had gone blank with shock. The three of them stood transfixed with horror under the invisibility cloak. The very last rays of the setting sun were casting a bloody light over the long-shadowed grounds. Then, behind them, they heard a wild howling. Hagrid, Harry muttered, without thinking about what he was doing. He made to turn back, but both Ron and Hermione seized his arms. Oh, Harry. That was nice of him. We can't, said Ron, who was paper white. He'll be in worse trouble if they know we've been to see him. Hermione's breathing was shallow and uneven. How could they? She choked. How could they? Come on, said Ron, whose teeth seemed to be chattering. They set off back toward the castle, walking slowly to keep themselves hidden under the cloak. Oh, they're under the cloak. I didn't visualize that, because it's not like that in the movie. The light was fading fast now. By the time they reached open ground, darkness was settling like a spell around them. Ooh, I like that. Settling like a spell. That's good. Good imagery. And alliteration. Scabbers, keep still, Ron hissed, clamping his hand over his chest. The rat was wriggling madly. Ron came to a sudden halt, trying to force Scabbers deeper into his pocket. What's the matter with you, you stupid rat? Stay still. Ouch! He bit me. Ron, be quiet, Hermione whispered urgently. Fudge will be out here in a minute. He won't stay put. Scabbers was plainly terrified. He was writhing with all his might, trying to break free of Ron's grip. Excuse me. I still have a bit of a cough. What's the matter with him? But Harry had just seen, slinking toward them, his body low to the ground, wide yellow eyes glinting eerily in the darkness. Crookshanks. Whether he could see them or was following the sound of Scabbers' squeaks, Harry couldn't tell. Crookshanks! Hermione moaned. No, go away, Crookshanks, go away! But the cat was getting nearer. Scabbers, no! Too late. The rat had slipped between Ron's clutched fingers, hit the ground, and scampered away. In one bound, Crookshanks sprang after him, and before Harry and Hermione could stop him, Ron had thrown the invisibility cloak off himself and pelted away into the darkness. Run! Hermione moaned. She and Harry looked at each other, then followed at a sprint. It was impossible to run full out under the cloak. They pulled it off, and it streamed behind them like a banner as they hurtled after Ron. They could hear his feet thundering along ahead and his shouts at Crookshanks. Get away from him! Get away! Scabbers, come here! There was a loud thud. Gotcha! Get off, you stinking cat! Harry and Hermione almost fell over Ron. They skidded to a stop right in front of him. He was sprawled on the ground, but Scabbers was back in his pocket. He had both hands held tight over the quivering lump. I was going to say squirming, but it says quivering. Ron, come on, back under the cloak, Hermione panted. Dumbledore, the minister, they'll be coming back out in a minute. But before they could cover themselves again, before they could even catch their breath, they heard the soft pounding of gigantic paws. Something was bounding toward them, quiet as a shadow, an enormous, pale-eyed, jet-black dog. Harry reached for his wand, but too late. The dog had made an enormous leap, and the front paws hit him on the chest. He keeled over, backward, in a whirl of hair. He felt its hot breath, saw inch-long teeth. But the force of its leap had carried it too far. It rolled off him. Dazed, feeling as though his ribs were broken, Harry tried to stand up. He could hear it growling as it skidded around for a new attack. Ron was on his feet. As the dog sprang back toward them, he pushed Harry aside. The dog's jaws fastened instead around Ron's outstretched arm. Harry lunged forward. He seized a handful of the brute's hair, but it was dragging Ron away as easily as though he were a rag doll. Then, out of nowhere, something hit Harry so hard across the face he was knocked off his feet again. He heard Hermione shriek with pain and fall, too. Harry groped for his wand, blinking blood out of his eyes. Lumos, he whispered. The wand light showed him the trunk of a thick tree. They had chased Scabbers into the shadow of the whomping willow, and its branches were creaking as though in a high wind, whipping backward and forward to stop them going nearer. And then, at the base of the trunk, was the dog, dragging Ron backward into a large gap in the roots. Ron was fighting furiously, but his head and torso were slipping out of sight. Run! Harry shouted, trying to follow, but a heavy branch whipped lethally through the air, and he was forced backward again. All they could see now was one of Ron's legs, which he had hooked around a root in an effort to stop the dog from pulling him farther underground. But a horrible crack cut the air like a gunshot. Ron's leg had broken, and a moment later his foot vanished from sight. Harry, we've got to go for help, Hermione gasped. She was bleeding too. The willow had cut her across the shoulder. No, that thing's big enough to eat him. We haven't got time. Harry, we're never going to get through without help. Another branch whipped down at them, twigs clenched like knuckles. If that dog can get in, we can, Harry panted, darting here and there, trying to find a way through the vicious, swishing branches, but he couldn't get an inch nearer to the tree roots without being in range of the tree's blows. Oh, help, help, Hermione whispered frantically, dancing uncertain on the spot. Please. Crookshanks darted forward. He slithered between the battering branches like a snake and placed his front paws upon a knot on the trunk. Abruptly, as though the tree had been turned to marble, it stopped moving. Not a leaf twitched or shook. I find it strange that Hermione doesn't know how to get through here, how she doesn't think of a spell. Especially when, at least in the movie, I don't know if it's like this in the book, but Lupin uses the Immobilis spell, which is the spell Hermione used in Chamber of Secrets, so you can't argue that she doesn't know the spell. I wonder why she doesn't think of the spell now. She's usually pretty good in a pinch. Crookshanks, Hermione whispered uncertainly. She now grasped Harry's arm painfully hard. How did he know? He's friends with that dog, said Harry grimly. I've seen them together. Come on, and keep your wand out. They covered the distance to the trunk in seconds, but before they had reached the gap in the roots, Crookshanks had slid into it with a flick of his bottle-brush tail. Harry went next. He crawled forward, head first, and slid down an earthy slope to the bottom of a very low tunnel. Crookshanks was a little way along, his eyes flashing in the light from Harry's wand. Seconds later, Hermione slithered down beside him. "Where's Ron?" she whispered in a terrified voice. "This way," said Harry, setting off, bent-backed, after Crookshanks. "Where does this tunnel come out?" Hermione asked, breathlessly, from behind him. "I don't know. It's marked on the Marauders' map, but Fred and George said no one's ever gotten into it. It goes off the edge of the map, but it looked like it was heading for Hogsmeade." They moved as fast as they could, bent almost double. Ahead of them, Crookshanks's tail bobbed in and out of view. On and on went the passage. It felt at least as long as the one to Honeyduke's. All Harry could think of was Ron, and what the enormous dog might be doing to him. He was drawing breath in sharp, painful gasps, running at a crouch. And then the tunnel began to rise. Moments later it twisted, and Crookshanks had gone. Instead, Harry could see a patch of dim light through a small opening. He and Hermione paused, gasping for breath, edging forward. Both raised their wands to see what lay beyond. It was a room, a very disordered, dusty room. Paper was peeling from the walls. There were stains all over the floor. Every piece of furniture was broken, as though somebody had smashed it. The windows were all boarded up. Harry glanced at Hermione, who looked very frightened, but nodded. Harry pulled himself out of the hole, staring around. The room was deserted, but a door to the right stood open, leading to a shadowy hallway. Hermione suddenly grabbed Harry's arm again. Her wide eyes were traveling around the boarded windows. "Harry," she whispered, "I think we're in the Shrieking Shack." Harry looked around. His eyes fell on a wooden chair near them. Large chunks had been torn out of it. One of the legs had been ripped off entirely. "Ghosts didn't do that," he said slowly. At that moment there was a creak overhead. Something had moved upstairs. Both of them looked up at the ceiling. Hermione's grip on Harry's arm was so tight he was losing feeling in his fingers. He raised his eyebrows at her. She nodded again and let go. Quietly as they could, they crept out into the hall and up the crumbling staircase. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, except the floor, where a wide, shiny stripe had been made by something being dragged upstairs. They reached the dark landing. "Nox," they whispered together, and the lights at the end of their wands went out. Only one door was open. As they crept toward it, they heard movement from behind it, a low moan, and then a deep, loud purring. They exchanged a last look, a last nod. Wand held tightly before him, Harry kicked the door wide open. On a magnificent four-poster bed with dusty hangings, lay Crookshanks, purring loudly at the sight of them. On the floor beside him, clutching his leg, which stuck out at a strange angle, was Ron. Harry and Hermione dashed across to him. "Ron, are you okay? Where's the dog?" "Not a dog," Ron moaned. His teeth were gritted with pain. "Harry, it's a trap." "What?" "He's the dog. He's an animagus." Ron was staring over Harry's shoulder. Harry wheeled around. With a snap, the man in the shadows closed the door behind them. Here we go. A mass of filthy, matted hair hung to his elbows. If eyes hadn't been shining out of the deep, dark sockets, he might have been a corpse. And he really does look like that in the movie. It's really good. The waxy skin was stretched so tightly over the bones of his face, it looked like a skull. His yellow teeth were bared in a grin. It was Sirius Black. "Expelliarmus," he croaked, pointing Ron's wand at them. Harry's and Hermione's wands shot out of their hands, high in the air, and Black caught them. Then he took a step closer. His eyes were fixed on Harry. "I thought you'd come and help your friend," he said hoarsely. His voice sounded as though he had long since lost the habit of using it. "Your father would have done the same for me. Brave of you, not to run for a teacher. I'm grateful. It'll make everything much easier." Do you have to sound creepy? I don't think this is necessary. The taunt about his father rang in Harry's ears as though Black had bellowed it. A boiling hate erupted in Harry's chest, leaving no place for fear. For the first time in his life, he wanted his wand back in his hand, not to defend himself, but to attack, to kill. Without knowing what he was doing, he started forward, but there was a sudden movement on either side of him, and two pairs of hands grabbed him and held him back. "No, Harry," Hermione gasped in a petrified whisper. Ron, however, spoke to Black. Oh, this is Ron? Oh, it was Hermione in the movie. Oh, no. That's such a good line. If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too. Ah, oh, Ron. That's so kick-ass. They took that line from you. Okay, so there's a section in my essay where I write about how they took a lot of Ron's lines and gave them to Hermione. And it's kind of sad, but I explain why they do it. I don't necessarily agree with it all the time, but I still understand why they did it, and I explain it in the essay. That's such a kick-ass line. I'm going to read it again. If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too, he said fiercely, though the effort of standing upright was draining him of still more color, and he swayed slightly as he spoke. So cool. So good. Man. Something flickered in Black's shadowed eyes. Lie down, he said quietly to Ron. You will damage that leg even more. Did you hear me? Ron said weakly. Oh, man! Ron has so few cool moments. Why did the movie take this from him? Though he was clinging painfully to Harry to stay upright. You'll have to kill all three of us. There will be only one murder here tonight, said Black, and his grin widened. Why's that? Harry spat, trying to wrench himself free of Ron and Hermione. Didn't care last time, did you? Didn't mind slaughtering all those muggles to get at Pettigrew. What's the matter? Gone soft in Azkaban? Harry, Hermione whimpered. Be quiet. He killed my mum and dad, Harry roared, and with a huge effort he broke free of Hermione's and Ron's restraint and lunged forward. He had forgotten about magic. He had forgotten that he was short and skinny and 13. Yeah, that happens. Whereas Black was a tall, full-grown man, all Harry knew was that he wanted to hurt Black as badly as he could, and that he didn't care how much he got hurt in return. Perhaps it was the shock of Harry doing something so stupid, but Black didn't raise the wands in time. One of Harry's hands fastened over his wasted wrist, forced the wand tips away. The knuckles of Harry's other hand collided with the side of Black's head, and they fell backward into the wall. Wow, Harry's really going at it. I don't remember that. Hermione was screaming. Ron was yelling. There was a blinding flash as the wands in Black's hand sent a jet of sparks into the air that missed Harry's face by inches. Harry felt the shrunken arm under his fingers twisting madly. But he clung on, his other hand punching every part of Black it could find. But Black's free hand had found Harry's throat. No, he hissed. I've waited too long. The fingers tightened. Harry choked, his glasses askew. Then he saw Hermione's foot swing out of nowhere. Black let go of Harry with a grunt of pain. Jeez, they don't need wands. They're just fine on their own. Ron had thrown himself on Black's wand hand, and Harry heard a faint clatter. He fought free of the tangle of bodies and saw his own wand rolling across the floor. He threw himself toward it, but... Ah! Crookshanks had joined the fray. Both sets of front claws had sunk themselves deep into Harry's arm. Harry threw him off, but Crookshanks now darted toward Harry's wand. No, you don't, roared Harry, and he aimed a kick at Crookshanks that made the cat leap aside, spitting. Harry snatched up his wand and turned. Get out of the way, he shouted at Ron and Hermione. They didn't need telling twice. Hermione, gasping for breath, her lip bleeding, scrambled aside. Harry, what spell are you going to use? Do you know any spells that are going to hurt him? Oh, that makes me think of the play, A Harry Potter Musical, if you've ever seen it. I reference it a lot. Where Harry's like, I'm going to kill him. And then he's like, I'm going to use every spell I know. Lumos, Jellyleg Jinx, Expelliarmus, all the spells I know. And they're all, like, non-lethal spells. They're not even non-lethal. They're, like, non-confrontational. There's even a part where, Ron and Hermione throw spells at him. Isn't it Ron says, Alohomora, and then the door behind them opens. And then Hermione's like, Lumos, and the lights turn on, and she's like, he's too much for us, Harry. It's so funny. It's so good. But yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do, Harry? Yeah, you got your wand. What are you gonna do? You don't know any spells. What are you gonna do? You don't learn the unforgivable curses until the next book, so. Where are we? Ron crawled to the four-poster and collapsed onto it, panting, his white face now tinged with green, both hands clutching his broken leg. Black was sprawled at the bottom of the wall. His thin chest rose and fell rapidly as he watched Harry walking slowly nearer, his wand pointing straight at Black's heart. "Going to kill me, Harry," he whispered. Harry stopped right above him, his wand still pointing at Black's chest, looking down at him. A livid bruise was rising around Black's left eye, and his nose was bleeding. "You killed my parents," said Harry, his voice shaking slightly, but his wand hand quite steady. Black stared up at him out of those sunken eyes. "I don't deny it," he said very quietly, "but if you knew the whole story..." Yeah, Sirius actually believes that he did kill his parents. Not directly, but he does feel responsible. It was him who suggested that they make Peter Pettigrew the secret keeper. He'll explain. "The whole story," Harry repeated, a furious pounding in his ears. "You sold them to Voldemort. That's all I need to know." "You've got to listen to me," Black said, and there was a note of urgency in his voice now. "You'll regret it if you don't. You don't understand." "I understand a lot better than you think," said Harry, and his voice shook more than ever. It's going to take a lot of convincing, but we'll get there. "You never heard her, did you? My mum, trying to stop Voldemort killing me. And you did that. You did it." Before either of them could say another word, something ginger streaked past Harry. Crookshanks leapt onto Black's chest and settled himself there, right over Black's heart. Ooh, what a cat. Wow. Black blinked and looked down at the cat. "Get off," he murmured, trying to push Crookshanks off him. But Crookshanks sank her claws into Black's robes and wouldn't shift. He turned his ugly, squashed face to Harry and looked up at him with those great yellow eyes. To his right, Hermione gave a dry sob. Harry stared down at Black and Crookshanks, his grip tightening on the wand. So what if he had to kill the cat, too? He was in league with Black. If it was prepared to die, trying to protect Black, that wasn't Harry's business. If Black wanted to save it, that only proved he cared more for Crookshanks than for Harry's parents. Harry raised the wand. Now was the moment to do it. Now was the moment to avenge his mother and father. He was going to kill Black. He had to kill Black. This was his chance. The seconds lengthened, and still Harry stood frozen there, wand poised, Black staring up at him, Crookshanks on his chest. Ron's ragged breathing came from near the bed. Hermione was quite silent. It's one thing to talk about killing somebody, another thing to think about killing somebody, and a whole other thing to actually do it. I always think about, if you've ever read the Alex Rider series, if you haven't, highly recommend. I believe it's in, is it Skeleton Key or is it Eagle Strike? I feel like it's Skeleton Key. It's been a while since I've read the books. But, basically, Alex Rider, who's a 14-year-old British spy, his parents were also killed, by their best friend. Interestingly. He confronted the man who did it, Yazin Grigorovich. He found him sleeping on a bunk, and Alex approached him and had a gun and everything, was about to shoot him. And Yazin looks at him, and he was like, "Do you really understand what you're doing?" He says, "You pull that trigger, and I forget everything. I know no more. But you're going to remember this moment for the rest of your life. It's going to haunt you forever. This is going to have more of an impact on you than on me," is essentially what he was saying. And Alex doesn't do it because he's not a killer. But yeah, I always think about that. Like you don't really know what it's like to do that. And it's a lot harder than it looks. It's a lot harder than it seems. And then came a new sound. Muffled footsteps were echoing up through the floor. Someone was moving downstairs. "We're up here!" Hermione screamed suddenly. "We're up here! Sirius Black! Quick!" Black made a startled movement that almost dislodged Crookshanks. Harry gripped his wand convulsively. "Do it now," said a voice in his head, but the footsteps were thundering up the stairs, and Harry still hadn't done it. The door of the room burst open in a shower of red sparks, and Harry wheeled around as Professor Lupin came hurtling into the room, his face bloodless, his wand raised and ready. His eyes flickered over Ron, lying on the floor, over Hermione, cowering next to the door, to Harry, standing there with his wand covering Black, and then to Black himself, crumpled and bleeding at Harry's feet. "Expelliarmus!" Lupin shouted. Harry's wand flew once more out of his hand. So did the two Hermione was holding. Lupin caught them all deftly, then moved into the room, staring at Black, who still had Crookshanks lying protectively across his chest. Harry stood there, feeling suddenly empty. He hadn't done it. His nerves had failed him. Black was going to be handed back to the Dementors. I like to mark key character moments, and that's what I was doing there. Then Lupin spoke in a very tense voice. "Where is he, Sirius?" Harry looked quickly at Lupin. He didn't understand what Lupin meant. Who was Lupin talking about? He turned to look at Black again. Black's face was quite expressionless. For a few seconds he didn't move at all. Then, very slowly, he raised his empty hand and pointed straight at Ron. Mystified, Harry glanced around at Ron, who looked bewildered. "But then," Lupin muttered, staring at Black so intently it seemed he was trying to read his mind, "why hasn't he shown himself before now? Unless..." Lupin's eyes suddenly widened, as though he was seeing something beyond Black, something none of the rest could see. "Unless he was the one. Unless you switched... without telling me?" Very slowly, his sunken gaze never leaving Lupin's face, Black nodded. "Professor," Harry interrupted loudly, "what's going on?" But he never finished the question, because what he saw made his voice die in his throat. Lupin was lowering his wand, gazing fixedly at Black. The professor walked to Black's side, seized his hand, pulled him to his feet so that Crookshanks fell to the floor, and embraced Black like a brother. Harry felt as though the bottom had dropped out of his stomach. "I don't believe it!" Hermione screamed. Lupin let go of Black and turned to her. She had raised herself off the floor and was pointing at Lupin, wide-eyed. You... Hermione. "You and him!" "Hermione, calm down." "I didn't tell anyone!" Hermione shrieked. "I've been covering up for you!" "Hermione, listen to me, please," Lupin shouted. "I can explain." Harry could feel himself shaking, not with fear, but with a fresh wave of fury. "I trusted you," he shouted at Lupin, his voice wavering out of control. "And all the time you've been his friend." Oh my goodness. That's another line that they gave to Hermione. Granted, that's Harry's line this time, but they gave it to Hermione. They just really like Emma's delivery, I guess. "You're wrong," said Lupin. "I haven't been Sirius's friend, but I am now. Let me explain." "No!" Hermione screamed. "Harry, don't trust him. He's been helping Black get into the castle. He wants you dead too. He's a werewolf." There was a ringing silence. Everyone's eyes were now on Lupin, who looked remarkably calm, though rather pale. "Not at all up to your usual standard, Hermione," he said. "Only 1 out of 3, I'm afraid. I have not been helping Sirius get into the castle, and I certainly don't want Harry dead." An odd shiver passed over his face, but I won't deny that I am a werewolf. Ron made a valiant effort to get up again, but fell back with a whimper of pain. Lupin made toward him, looking concerned, but Ron gasped, "Get away from me, werewolf!" He's used to that. Lupin stopped dead. Then, with an obvious effort, he turned to Hermione and said, "How long have you known?" "Ages," Hermione whispered. since I did Professor Snape's essay. He'll be delighted, said Lupin coolly. He signed that essay hoping someone would realize what my symptoms meant. Did you check the lunar chart and realize I was always ill at the full moon? Or did you realize that the bugger changed into the moon when it saw me? Both, Hermione said quietly. Lupin forced a laugh. You're the cleverest witch of your age I've ever met, Hermione. I'm not, Hermione whispered. If I'd been a bit cleverer, I'd have told everyone what you are. But they already know, said Lupin. At least the staff do. Dumbledore hired you when he knew you were a werewolf? Ron gasped. Is he mad? Some of the staff thought so, said Lupin. He had to work very hard to convince certain teachers that I'm trustworthy. And he was wrong, Harry yelled. You've been helping him all the time. He was pointing at Black, who suddenly crossed to the four-poster bed and sank onto it, his face hidden in one shaking hand. His face hidden in one shaking hand, I understand. Crookshanks leapt up beside him and stepped onto his lap, purring. Ron edged away from both of them, dragging his leg. I have not been helping Sirius, said Lupin. If you'll give me a chance, I'll explain. Look. He separated Harry's, Ron's, and Hermione's wands and threw each back to its owner. Harry caught his, stunned. There, said Lupin, sticking his own wand back into his belt. You're armed. We're not. Now will you listen? Harry didn't know what to think. Was it a trick? If you hadn't been helping him, he said with a furious glance at Black, how did you know he was here? The map, said Lupin. The Marauder's map. I was in my office examining it. You know how to work it? Harry said suspiciously. He sure does. Of course I know how to work it, said Lupin, waving his hand impatiently. I helped write it. I'm Moony. That was my friend's nickname for me at school. You wrote the important thing is. I was watching it carefully this evening because I had an idea that you, Ron, and Hermione might try and sneak out of the castle to visit Hagrid before his hippogriff was executed. And I was right, wasn't I? He had started to pace up and down, looking at them. Little patches of dust rose at his feet. You might have been wearing your father's old cloak, Harry. How do you know about the cloak? The number of times I saw James disappearing under it? Said Lupin, waving an impatient hand again. The point is, even if you're wearing an invisibility cloak, you still show up on the Marauder's map. I watched you cross the grounds and enter Hagrid's hut. 20 minutes later, you left Hagrid and set off back toward the castle, but you were now accompanied by somebody else. What? Said Harry. No, we weren't. I couldn't believe my eyes, said Lupin, still pacing and ignoring Harry's interruption. I thought the map must be malfunctioning. How could he be with you? No one was with us, said Harry, and then I saw another dot, moving fast toward you, labeled Sirius Black. I saw him collide with you. I watched as he pulled two of you into the Whomping Willow. One of us, Ron said angrily. No, Ron, said Lupin. Two of you. I'm so excited. He had stopped his pacing, his eyes moving over Ron. Do you think I could have a look at the rat? He said evenly. What? Said Ron. What's Scabbers got to do with it? Everything, said Lupin. Could I see him, please? Ron hesitated, then put a hand inside his robes. Scabbers emerged, thrashing desperately. Ron had to seize his long, bald tail to stop him escaping. Crookshanks stood up on Black's leg and made a soft hissing noise. Lupin moved closer to Ron. He seemed to be holding his breath as he gazed intently at Scabbers. What? Ron said again, holding Scabbers close to him, looking scared. What's my rat got to do with anything? That's not a rat, croaked Sirius Black suddenly. What do you mean? Of course he's a rat. No, he's not, said Lupin quietly. He's a wizard. An animagus, said Black, by the name of Peter Pettigrew. Dun, dun, dun! So good. How creepy that he's actually a wizard. He let this guy sleep in his bed for the last 12 years. Ooh, creepy. Or however long he's had the rat. But that's the end of the chapter. So we'll be reading chapter 18, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, and hear the rest of the story in 15 minutes. Now it's time for my customary break. Now is a good time to get up and stretch, use the restroom, get a snack, get a drink, do whatever you have to do. And also feel free to press the like button And click subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Turn on your notifications so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. And follow me on Twitter to see my streaming schedule and other things that I post. Also, check out my Patreon, link in the description. And feel free to comment in the chat or the comment section, and I will be right back. Welcome back. Now it is time to get back into it and read Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. It took a few seconds for the absurdity of this statement to sink in. Then Ron voiced what Harry was thinking. "You're both mental. Ridiculous," said Hermione faintly. "Peter Pettigrew's dead," said Harry. "He killed him 12 years ago." He pointed at Black, whose face twitched convulsively. "I meant to," he growled, his yellow teeth bared, "but little Peter got the better of me. Not this time, though." And Crookshanks was thrown to the floor as Black lunged at Scabbers. Ron yelled with pain as Black's weight fell on his broken leg. "Sirius, no!" Lupin yelled, launching himself forwards and dragging Black away from Ron again. "Wait! You can't do it just like that. They need to understand. We've got to explain." "We can explain afterwards," snarled Black, trying to throw Lupin off. One hand was still clawing the air as it tried to reach Scabbers, who was squealing like a piglet, scratching Ron's face and neck as he tried to escape. "They've got a right to know everything," Lupin panted, still trying to restrain Black. "Ron's kept him as a pet. There are parts of it even I don't understand. And Harry, you owe Harry the truth, Sirius." Black stopped struggling, though his hollowed eyes were still fixed on Scabbers, who was clamped tightly under Ron's bitten, scratched, and bleeding hands. "All right, then," Black said, without taking his eyes off the rat. "Tell them whatever you like, but make it quick, Remus. I want to commit the murder I was in prison for." "You're nutters, both of you," said Ron shakily, looking round at Ron and at Harry and Hermione for support. I was about to say supper. Support. "I'm hungry. I've had enough of this. I'm off." "Yeah, okay, Ron. Bye." He tried to heave himself up on his good leg, but Lupin raised his hand again, pointing it at Scabbers. "You're going to hear me out, Ron," he said quietly. "Just keep a tight hold on Peter while you listen." "He's not Peter, he's Scabbers!" Ron yelled, trying to force the rat back into his front pocket, but Scabbers was fighting too hard. Ron swayed and overbalanced, and Harry caught him and pushed him back down to the bed. Then, ignoring Black, Harry turned to Lupin. "There are witnesses who saw Peter die," he said. "A whole street full of them. They didn't see what they thought they saw," said Black savagely, still watching Scabbers struggling in Ron's hands. "Everyone thought Sirius killed Peter," said Lupin, nodding. "I believed it myself, until I saw the map tonight. Because the Marauders map never lies. Peter's alive. Ron's holding him, Harry." Harry looked down at Ron, and as their eyes met, they agreed, silently. Black and Lupin were both out of their minds. Their story made no sense whatsoever. How could Scabbers be Peter Pettigrew? Azkaban must have unhinged Black after all. But why was Lupin playing along with him? Then Hermione spoke, in a trembling, would-be calm sort of voice, as though trying to will Professor Lupin to talk sensibly. "But Professor Lupin, Scabbers can't be Pettigrew. It just can't be true. You know it can't. Why can't it be?" Lupin said calmly, as though they were in class, and Hermione had simply spotted a problem in an experiment with Grindylows. Because people would know if Peter Pettigrew had been an animagus. We did animagi in class with Professor McGonagall, and I looked them up when I did my homework. The Ministry of Magic keeps tabs on witches and wizards who could become animals. There's a register showing what animal they become and the markings and things. And I went and looked Professor McGonagall up on the register, and there have been only 7 animagi in this century, and Pettigrew's name wasn't on the list. Harry had barely had time to marvel inwardly at the effort Hermione put into her homework when Lupin started to laugh. "Right again, Hermione," he said, "but the Ministry never knew that there used to be 3 unregistered animagi running around Hogwarts." If you're going to tell them the story, get a move on, Remus, snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers' every desperate move. I've waited 12 years. I'm not going to wait much longer. I did my waiting! 12 years of it! In Azkaban! I don't think that line is actually in the book. All right. But you'll need to help me, Sirius, said Lupin. I only know how it began. Lupin broke off. There had been a loud creak behind him. Someone's listening in. The bedroom door had opened of its own accord. All three of them stared at it. Then Lupin strode toward it and looked out into the landing. No one there. This place is haunted, said Ron. It's not, said Lupin, still looking at the door in a puzzled way. The shrieking shack was never haunted. The screams and howls the villagers used to hear were made by me. He pushed his graying hair out of his eyes, thought for a moment, then said, That's where all this starts, with my becoming a werewolf. None of this could have happened if I hadn't been bitten, and if I hadn't been so foolhardy. He looked sober and tired. Ron started to interrupt, but Hermione said, Shh! She was watching Lupin very intently. I was a very small boy when I received the bite. My parents tried everything, but in those days there was no cure. The potion that Professor Snape has been making for me is a very recent discovery. It made me safe, you see, as long as I take it in the week preceding the full moon. I keep my mind when I transform. I am able to curl up in my office, a harmless wolf, and wait for the moon to wane again. Before the wolfsbane potion was discovered, however, I became a fully fledged monster once a month. It seemed impossible that I would be able to come to Hogwarts. Other parents weren't likely to want their children exposed to me. But then Dumbledore became headmaster, and he was sympathetic. Yeah, Dumbledore is more open-minded. He said that as long as we took certain precautions, there was no reason I shouldn't come to school. Lupin sighed and looked directly at Harry. I told you months ago that the Whomping Willow was planted the year I came to Hogwarts. The truth is that it was planted because I came to Hogwarts. This house, Lupin looked miserably around the room, the tunnel that leads to it, they were built for my use. Once a month, I was smuggled out of the castle into this place to transform. The tree was placed at the tunnel mouth to stop anyone coming across me while I was dangerous. Harry couldn't see where the story was going, but he was listening raptly all the same. I thought rapt was spelled with a W. I used that word somewhere with a W, and I gotta make sure I fix it. The only sound apart from Lupin's voice was Scabbers' frightened squeaking. My transformations in those days were terrible. It was very painful to turn into a werewolf. I was separated from humans to bite, so I bit and scratched myself instead. The villagers heard the noise and the screaming and thought they were hearing particularly violent spirits. Dumbledore encouraged the rumor. Even now, when the house has been silent for years, the villagers don't dare approach it. But apart from my transformations, I was happier than I had ever been in my life. For the first time ever, I had friends. 3 great friends. Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and of course, your father, Harry, James Potter. Yay! Now, my 3 friends could hardly fail to notice that I disappeared once a month. I made up all sorts of stories. I told them my mother was ill and that I had to go home to see her. I was terrified they would desert me the moment they found out what I was. Yeah, that's, 'cause he's discriminated, 'cause he's a werewolf. But of course, they, like you, Hermione, worked out the truth. And they didn't desert me at all. Instead, they did something for me that would make my transformations not only bearable, but the best times of my life. They became animagi. My dad, too? Said Harry, astounded. Yes, indeed, said Lupin. It took them the best part of 3 years to work out how to do it. Your father and Sirius here were the cleverest students in the school, and lucky they were, because the animagus transformation can go horribly wrong. One reason the Ministry keeps a close watch on those attempting to do it. Peter needed all the help he could get from James and Sirius. Finally, in our 5th year, they managed it. They could each turn into a different animal at will. But how did that help you? Said Hermione, sounding puzzled. They couldn't keep me company as humans, so they kept me company as animals, said Lupin. A werewolf was only a danger to people. They sneaked out of the castle every month under James's invisibility cloak. They transformed. Peter, as the smallest, could slip between the willow's attacking branches and touch the knot that freezes it. They would then slip down the tunnel and join me. Under their influence, I became less dangerous. My body was still wolfish, but my mind seemed to become less so while I was with them. "Hurry up, Remus," snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers with a horrible sort of hunger on his face. "I'm getting there, Sirius, I'm getting there." Well, highly exciting possibilities were open to us now that we could all transform. Soon we were leaving the shrieking shack and roaming the school grounds and the village by night. Sirius and James transformed into such large animals they were able to keep a werewolf in check. I doubt whether any Hogwarts students ever found out more about the Hogwarts grounds and Hogsmeade than we did. And that's how we came to write the Marauders map and sign it with our nicknames. Sirius is Padfoot, Peter is Wormtail, James was Prongs. "What sort of animal?" Harry began, but Hermione cut him off. "That was still really dangerous. Running around in the dark with a werewolf? What if you've given the others the slip and bitten somebody?" "A thought that still haunts me," said Lupin heavily, "and there were near misses, many of them. We laughed about them afterwards. We were young, thoughtless, carried away with our own cleverness. I sometimes felt guilty about betraying Dumbledore's trust, of course. He had admitted me to Hogwarts when no other headmaster would have done so, and he had no idea I was breaking the rules he had set down for my own and others' safety. He never knew I had led 3 fellow students to becoming animagi illegally. But I always managed to forget my guilty feelings every time we sat down to plan our next month's adventure." Wow, this chapter's really short. It's done already. Holy moly. And I haven't changed. Lumen's face had hardened, and there was self-disgust in his voice. "All this year, I've been battling with myself, wondering whether I should tell Dumbledore that Sirius was an animagus, but I didn't do it. Why? Because I was too cowardly. It would have meant admitting that I'd betrayed his trust while I was at school, admitting that I'd led others along with me, and Dumbledore's trust has meant everything to me. Yeah, I understand that. He let me into Hogwarts as a boy, and he gave me a job when I had been shunned all my adult life, unable to find paid work because of what I am. And so I convinced myself that Sirius was getting into the school using dark arts he learned from Voldemort, that being an animagus has nothing to do with it. So, in a way, Snape's been right about me all along." "Snape?" said Black harshly, taking his eyes off Scabbers for the first time in minutes and looking up at Lupin. "What's Snape got to do with it?" "He's here, Sirius," said Lupin heavily. "He's teaching here as well." He looked up at Harry, Ron, and Hermione. "Professor Snape was at school with us. He fought very hard against my appointment to the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. He'd been telling Dumbledore all year that I am not to be trusted. He has his reasons. You see, Sirius had played a trick on him, which nearly killed him. A trick which involved me." Black made a derisive noise. "It served him right," he sneered, "sneaking around, trying to find out what we were up to, hoping he could get us expelled." "Severus was very interested in where I went every month," Lupin told Harry, Ron, and Hermione. "We were in the same year, you know, and we, didn't like each other very much." Oh, that's another connection to Order of the Phoenix. I didn't think about that. Whoa, TP. As you'll know, I referenced the triangle. Let me pull it up. It's in Documents. Let me pull up my handy-dandy pyramid here. Nope, that's not the right. Oh, there it is. This is the one I wanted. Yes, here is my my pyramid here. So if you're unfamiliar, I will make connections. Certain books have particular connections to each other. Prisoner of Azkaban or the Phoenix have particular connections to each other. In this book, we first are introduced to Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, and their relationship to Severus Snape, and we actually see that play out in a memory in Order of the Phoenix. He especially disliked James, jealous, I think, of James' talent on the Quidditch field. Anyway, Snape had seen me crossing the grounds with Madame Pomfrey one evening as she led me toward the Whomping Willow to transform. Sirius thought it would be amusing to tell Snape all he had to do was prod the knot on the tree trunk with a long stick and he'd be able to get in after me. Well, of course, Snape tried it. If he'd got as far as his house, he'd have met a fully grown werewolf. But your father, who'd heard what Sirius had done, went after Snape and pulled him back, at great risk to his life. Snape glimpsed me, though, at the end of the tunnel. He was forbidden by Dumbledore to tell anybody, but from that time on he knew what I was. So that's why Snape doesn't like you, said Harry slowly, because he thought you were in on the joke. That's right. Oh, not Lupin. That's right, sneered a cold voice from the wall behind Lupin. Severus Snape was pulling off the invisibility cloak, his wand pointing directly at Lupin. And that is the end of chapter 18. It is really short. That really caught me off guard. But yeah, that is the end of that. Lots of bombshells being dropped here. And the story and the bombshells aren't even done, honestly. We still have... That was only half the story. It was getting good, and we have to stop now. But unfortunately, we have to wait until next week to pick it up. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I read those. And please leave a like on the video or the stream whenever you're watching this. And yeah, it really helps. Tells YouTube that you like it. It's more likely to share it with other people. And if you're not a subscriber, become a subscriber and click subscribe. Also, turn on notifications and the notification bell right next to that button, and it'll notify you when I upload and when I go live. I plan to go live again next week. The plan is Friday night, not sure what time yet. I'll be playing more Halo, and Saturday night, again, not sure what time yet, and I'll read the next 2 chapters of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So please follow me on Twitter, link in the description, so that you can know what my streaming schedule is going to be. Also, follow me on Patreon if you want access to that Harry Potter essay, which I will post on Monday, and I will post a video on YouTube about it as well. And you can check it out there. So link in the description. You can check it out now if you want. There's a personal narrative on there if you'd like to read that. Or if you just like to support me, that's okay too. Yeah. And so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a magical evening. Bye-bye.